But what else? He opposes gay marriage, he supports the death penalty, and the other things I've previously stated. On the death penalty, let me give you an example of how unfortunate his position is. He is very good at saying, oh yeah, you know, the death penalty, it's really applied disproportionate, this and that, but I support it for the worst crimes. While he's doing this, there are other legislators, New Jersey legislature, for instance, and the governor there, who are taking principled, courageous positions, fighting against public opinion to try to turn what we think about this. Why can't Obama take that position? You know what he did? He legislated his death penalty law. You know what it was? It was that any capital defendant must be videotaped when they're interviewed. Okay, this is pretty good, but I can tell you as someone that handles law cases that anybody that gets arrested on a murder case is going to have their interview videotaped already. But the irony of his position is you don't know at the time you're interviewing somebody in a murder case whether or not it's a capital case or not, a death penalty case. Why? Because the police don't make the charging decision. That's made later by the district attorney at the time they prepare a complaint for the arraignment. You know, a matter of a day later or happening at the same time. So it's basically a law with almost no relevance. This appears to be a recurring problem for this junior senator. There was a story in the New York Times in February that talked about how he was on the campaign trail saying that he had passed reform and oversight of the nuclear industry. Well, what happened in this story, it was unbelievable. The New York Times, obviously, good paper, good sources. It was unbelievable what happened. Constituents of his had come complaining, saying that they were not informed of radioactive leaks from a company called Exelon in Illinois. So he put together a piece of legislation that said, all right, you got to immediately report these leaks. Well, by the time it was in committee and the Exelon executives, who just by coincidence, I guess, have contributed over $250,000 to his various campaigns, suddenly it was no longer a mandatory reporting. It turned into guidelines for the American regulators to follow to decide whether or not to tell the public anything. And guess what? It didn't even pass. It didn't even come up for a vote. But he was telling people that he had passed this important legislation. Recently, there's been some stuff out in the press about the Energy Policy Act of 2005 and how it relates to the current reality that we have with ExxonMobil making over $40 billion a year in profits. And what is everybody going to do about it? And of course, Obama has come forward with a plan that's better than Hillary's. But I want to share with you what he's talking about so that you understand the faulty logic of how to go after this problem. He's in effect saying oil prices per barrel are over $100 a barrel, right? So let's have a windfall profit tax so that everything over $80 will tax by a certain amount. Okay, that's great, but it doesn't limit that the number can go higher in any way, which means whatever you tax, these companies could just as easily adjust their prices further up so that they don't really lose any money whatsoever. What's wrong with trying to investigate this as a criminal act, the price fixing that we know is going on? You know what it is when these oil companies appear before Congress and their answer to how to bring oil prices down with a straight face, the executive at I think one of the vice presidents at ExxonMobil actually told Congress persons that they should allow drilling in the Arctic Reserve. That'll bring the price down. This is outrageous. This is crazy. Now, there are folks like Ralph Nader that say, look, there are things like electricity and oil that are basic human needs, and we ought to treat this as a public utility to the extent that we can allow regulators to come in and limit the amount of profit that these companies are allowed to make on this product, period. Let's deal with it that way. The other thing is, this is not a new phenomenon that we're dealing with $40 billion. Back in 2005, when the Energy Policy Act was passed and Obama voted for it, ExxonMobil had $36 billion profit. Royal Dutch Shell had $25 billion. British Petroleum, $22 billion. This has been going on for a number of years. So why did Senator Obama think back then that we needed to subsidize fossil fuel production? Why would you give companies with record profits subsidies and tax breaks to do something that they're supposed to use their profits to do? And you know what happened when this was sold and presented to the American public? They focused on, well, we're putting money in alternative fuels and conservation. Yeah, you're putting less money in that than what you're subsidizing for fossil fuel production. And incidentally, this was a bill that had $4 billion just for tax breaks, subsidies, loan guarantees for the nuclear industry. The Chicago Sun-Times at the time said, now's a curious time to be dishing out oil welfare. You know? The point that I want to make, and I think it's relatively apparent, that we're dealing with political entities that are not going to change the status quo. At their best, they're going to come up with radical proposals at election time, but they can't explain to us why they were missing in action on the home mortgage crisis when Hillary says to you, oh, if I had been president. What? If you had been president, what?